My mother passed away. Can you please come home so we can hold the funeral? But when I said this, my husband gave me a surprising reply. I can't because I'm on a company trip right now. What? I don't have anything to do with it, so I'm gonna enjoy the trip. I was absolutely stunned at my husband's unbelievable words. But 5 days later, something unexpected happened. I had no idea what was going to happen. Why didn't you answer my calls? Your mother passed away when I was at the funeral. We heard what I had to say, so he was so surprised he couldn't speak. My name is Chloe, and I'm a 53-year-old homemaker. My husband Mason and I have been married for 25 years. We have one son who has already graduated from college and is an adult. He is now independent. He comes home once in a while, but he seems to be very busy and we see him very rarely. So I spend my time with my husband alone, but I'm getting tired of living with my husband. Hey, dinner? Alright. My husband just bosses me around and makes me do whatever he says. It is natural that the wife does the housework, so I do whatever he asks me. I haven't been able to have a hot meal because he's so demanding when it comes to how I prepare meals. However, I cannot complain strongly because we are able to live thanks to my husband's salary, and even if I say something, it might immediately turn into a fight. My husband would throw a huge tantrum, and I would feel exhausted after each fight. My husband also disrespects my housework and often comes home late. If it was only overtime work, I would think that this is understandable, but he often goes out drinking without any notice and comes home late at night without eating dinner and just goes straight to bed. In the worst cases, he doesn't come home until morning, and when I call him, he would say he just spent the night at the office. Because of this, the food I had cooked for him goes to waste. When I don't know if my husband will eat dinner, I don't want to cook something elaborate. However, if I serve him something easy to make, he complains about it. If that is the case, he should come home every day and eat dinner. But when I tell him that, his face turns red and he gets angry, saying, "Who do you think you owe for your dinner?" My husband has always been like that and even pushed me to solely take care of our child. He never attended our son's class visits or school recitals. When he would show up, he would keep complaining about how he wants to be anywhere other than here. I remember how angry I was when I saw my husband open a beer can while I was at one of our son's sport games. After alcohol was banned at the sports meetings, it made him want to go even less. I began inviting my own parents so that my husband didn't have to come. That's how much my husband did not care about anyone but himself. In fact, my son also said he has a few memories of his father. They've only ever had a few conversations together, but about his career path. So it's almost as if I raised my son by myself. My relationship with my husband has cooled off. It was as if I had stayed married to him because of my son. So after my son left the nest, I felt suffocated being alone with just my husband. My husband is still the same. He still works overtime and tries to avoid seeing me as much as possible. Can we really call ourselves a married couple in such a state? Despite these doubts, I'm not sure that I'm ready for a divorce. I had become a full-time housewife upon marriage, and I had not worked since then. So I thought it would be difficult to make a living in my old age and on a part-time job. I was not confident that I could survive on my own after the divorce. Then one day my husband spoke to me. "I'm going to be transferred to a different office." "Transferred where?" "Texas." "That far?" My husband is going to be transferred by himself to a branch office in the next state, and he's moving next week. "I need you to pack my bags." "What? I have to do it?" "Huh? I'm busy every day. You're always free at home." I was angry at my husband's demanding remarks, but I still felt better knowing that I would be free to spend some time alone in this house for a while. I packed my husband's belongings and made arrangements to send them to his new address. See you later. Yeah. I was stunned when he left without saying goodbye or making eye contact with me, but the movement of the front door closed. I raised both hands in the air and felt so relieved. Now I don't have to stress about preparing dinner. I don't have to listen to his every tedious instruction. I can cook my favorite dishes at any time of the day just for me and enjoy them hot and fresh. I was impressed by how delicious freshly prepared food tastes. I was also able to take a shower in my own time. When I lived with my husband, I was not allowed to take a leisurely shower, so it had been a long time since I had such a relaxing time. For the first week or two, I experienced the joy of living on my own as much as I could. Then, after that, I decided to look for a job for the future. Until now, I had been unable to work because of my husband's dinner and other commitments. But now that my son is independent and I don't have to think about my husband, I'm free to work. So I began to look for a job. Then I found an opening for a clerical position from 9 to 17 on the weekdays. I applied for it at the spur of the moment, and to my surprise, I was hired. They were willing to hire me because of my old qualifications and experience working as an office clerk. I was grateful that they hired me and worked very hard. I was inexperienced and there were difficulties, but even so, I gradually regained my old work habits and became accustomed to my new job. It was very enjoyable to be out in the world for the first time in a long time and to communicate with various people, and I gave it a lot of energy to my new life. I had no idea my life would become so much more enjoyable now that my husband had moved out on his own. Even my son, who comes home sometimes, says to me, "Mom, you look happier." Stress has a negative effect on everything. I can see that when I look at you. You're right. I'm surprised at how much fun I'm having right now. Time passed quickly, and a year passed. My husband came home for Christmas, but rarely came home for the rest of the year. It seemed to be just fine to see him every once or twice a year, and I was able to have a normal conversation with him then. I thought this made me feel as if we were just distant relatives, but I was happy with that, so I didn't think anything was wrong with it. But then something happened that complicated the relationship between my husband and me. What? My mother? It happened all of a sudden. I received a phone call from the hospital. My mother was grocery shopping when she suddenly collapsed. I rushed to the hospital. My mother was asleep in her hospital bed. The doctor noticed my arrival and went into another room to talk to him. The doctor said, "Your mother had a myocardial infarction and was brought to the hospital." And that's when we found out. Then I said, "What, is it cancer?" To my horror, my mother was diagnosed with terminal cancer. She had only about 6 months to live. My mind went blank when my mother suddenly was diagnosed with cancer, but I was glad she was still alive. If the news from the hospital had been sad news about my mother, I would not have been able to endure it. Then I went back to my parents' house for a long time to take care of my mother and work. My father had already passed away a few years before, and my mother was living alone at home. "Chloe, I'm sorry to bother you." "What are you talking about, Mom? This is nothing." My mother was depressed because she thought she was burdening me, but for me it was no bother at all. In fact, I'm glad I was able to spend a lot of time alone with my mother like this because it has been a long time. However, a few months after I started living with my mother, her condition deteriorated. She had to be hospitalized. "Grandma, are you okay?" "Oh, thank you for visiting me. I'm glad I get to see my grandson's face." My son would regularly follow me to the hospital to see my mother. My mother was happy to see her own grandson. By the way, my husband, of course, never came to see me or my family at all. I understand that he's working far away, so it couldn't be helped. I explained my mother's situation to him, but he would just say, "I see. or other short replies like that. I was frustrated by my husband. However, if my husband had not been working in a different state, I would not be able to take care of my mother for this long. So I decided to let it go for now. After that, my mother tried her best to stay alive, but she was unable to overcome her illness and passed away. My mother's death was very sad, but I was still very happy to witness her final days and say goodbye. And I had a lot of things to do. I had to make funeral arrangements and contacted our relatives. I called my husband first. Even though he was working in a different state, he would have to come to the funeral. If it was a bereavement, he would have been able to take off and come here without any problem. My husband answered the phone and I told him briefly, "My mom just passed away. We're going to hold a funeral, so can you come home right away?" But when I said this, my husband gave me a surprising response. "I can't because I'm on a company trip right now." "What? A trip?" "Members of the company and some friends are going with me." "Wait a minute, but I just told you my mother passed away." "Yeah, I heard." "Are you not coming to the funeral?" "Yeah, because I can't cancel my airline tickets." "Are you serious? Your wife's mother just died." "It's none of my business. I'm going to enjoy my trip. You and our son will be enough at the funeral, right?" I was absolutely shocked at his unbelievable words. "I can't believe it. You're such an asshole." "What? Shut up. You're my wife. You're not allowed to talk to me like that." "Are you really not coming back here?" "No, I'm not coming back. I'm on the verge of a fun trip. Don't make me feel bad. I'm hanging up right now." "Wait, hey." My husband said this and hung up the phone. After that, no matter how many times I called, he wouldn't answer. I can't believe him. How selfish he can be. My son was also stunned that my husband prioritized this trip instead of the funeral. We decided to not think about my husband and concentrate on the funeral. Many people attended the funeral, and people were surprised that my husband was not there. There were people so surprised that some people even asked me if I was divorced. My parents-in-law also apologized for how foolish their son was being. I heard that my husband has been ignoring their calls from his parents as well. I wonder if he wanted to enjoy the trip that much. I'm thoroughly disgusted by my husband's selfishness. But then, 5 days later, something unexpected happened. To my surprise, my mother-in-law was in a car accident and died. Just a few days ago, we just had my mother's funeral, and she was very kind to me and my son. I panicked when I heard the sad news. I couldn't believe that 2 of my relatives would be gone within a week. Mentally, it was a bit unbearable. I immediately called my husband, but he didn't answer the phone. Was he still on his trip? Even though my father-in-law and my brother-in-law contacted him, my husband never responded or answered the phone. We ended up holding my mother-in-law's funeral without my husband. It was not until after the funeral that I got in touch with my husband. "Hello? You're being so clingy." "Why wouldn't you pick up the phone?" "I told you I was on a trip." "Were you on a trip for a week?" "Shut up. Who cares how long I decided to take a vacation?" "Even so, I've been so out of touch with you. You could have at least picked up once." What do you need?" "Your mother passed away and we had a funeral." "What?" Upon hearing my story, my husband fell silent, perhaps too startled to speak. After a few seconds of silence, my husband asked me, his voice trembling, "Is it true that my mother is dead? Wasn't it your mother who passed away?" "A few days after my mother died of cancer, your mother died in a car accident." "Car accident?" "Not only me, but your father and brother have been trying to get in touch with you many times, so why didn't you return their calls?" "Well, I didn't think something like this was going to happen." "My relatives, including your father and your family, were furious. They all said you were going to sever ties between you." "Oh, no." "Anyway, come over here at once and let's talk about everything properly." My husband, seeing the gravity of the situation, complied. I met with my husband for the first time in a long time, and we talked about our future. I asked my son to join us. I got right down to business. "I'm going to get straight to the point. I want you to divorce me. Divorce? My husband was surprised to hear that I was divorcing him. Oh, come on. That's a bit much, don't you think? What? Are you seriously saying that? Do you have any idea how much I've endured your harassment until now? It's too embarrassing that you didn't even thank me for all the housework I did. Didn't even come to visit my mother, didn't attend her funeral, went on vacation, and on top of that, didn't attend your own mother's funeral and went out on playing around. I can't stay married to such a horrible person. I want a divorce. I said and thrust the divorce papers at him. My husband flinched under my momentum, but he responded to me. I didn't know about my mom, so it couldn't be helped. Besides, can you live on your own after you leave me? Don't get carried away. You had to support me. My husband's face turned red, and he raised his voice, but I was no longer upset. You really don't care about me, do you? I told you, I started working right after you moved out on your own. Did you forget that I had to fill out paperwork for that? My husband finally seemed to remember when I said that. Well, then, I want the amount you worked for as part of your share of the property. Don't think you can get a free divorce like this. He was a rotten man, no matter how far he went. Well, it can't be helped because I still want to get rid of you. When I said this, my sons opened his mouth. Well, then Dad, you owe Mom alimony. Alimony? I was confused. My husband stared at my son. Hey, what are you talking about? Why do I owe alimony? When my husband said this, my son took something out of his bag and spread it on the table. These are pictures that are proof you were cheating on Mom. You were bringing women into your apartment that lived with you, and a while you were working out of state. My husband looked at the pictures and was absolutely mortified. I had no idea that my husband was having an affair, so I was equally surprised. How do you have these? A classmate of mine from college works at the same company as you. When you went to your branch office on a business trip, he saw you getting friendly with young female employees at the branch office. He asked someone at the branch office about it, and they told me that there was a rumor going around that they were having an affair. So I hired a professional to get some solid evidence. I got the evidence right away, so it was cheap. My son's explanation made my husband's face turn blue at once. I didn't know that was the case. You've been traveling with your lover, haven't you? My husband, in a cold sweat, and was saying, No, that's not. He was becoming more and more panicked. I'm going to charge you and your affair partner alimony. Oh, no. My husband was paralyzed in fear. He didn't think I would have found about the affair. I was so glad my son was there because I could not have found that out on my own. After that, I officially divorced my husband and demanded alimony from him and his lover. I sent a content-certified letter to the company. Apparently, the woman whom he had had an affair with is now being shunned by people at work, who now know that the rumors were true. Furthermore, my husband's inability to attend his wife's mother's funeral and his own mother's due to the affair became known throughout the workplace, and he was no longer treated as a human being. Unable to bear such cold stares, my husband resigned from the company. However, his own family despises him for the same reason and has cut him off, so he has no one to turn to. He's now spending his days paying alimony while working as a freelancer in his hometown. The room we originally lived in was a rental, but my ex-husband's salary is not enough to pay the rent, so he canceled the lease and now is living in a cheap apartment. My ex-husband has been sending me emails laminating the situation, asking to get back together with him, but I ignore all of them and just put them in my junk mail. I'm currently doing well at work and living comfortably in a reasonably priced apartment, so there's nothing wrong with that. Any situation is heaven compared to when I was living with my ex-husband. I will continue to do the best at my job and live happily ever after in a life that fits my lifestyle. Thank you for watching.